Good morning, children. How are you? In the previous session, we have discussed about one of the important topic in your biology, that is tissue, right? What is tissue? Tissue is a group of cells which perform same functions and similar structure, right? Tissues are classified into two different types. One is plant tissues and animal tissues, right? So in the previous slide, we have discussed about plant tissues. Plant tissues are consists of two categories. One is meristematic tissues and permanent tissues. Meristematic tissues are again three types based on the location and functions. Apical meristem, intercalary meristem and lateral meristem, and you know the functions of these different types of tissues. Again, permanent tissues classified into simple permanent tissues and complex permanent tissues. Simple permanent tissues helps in protective tissues and supportive tissues. So based on their structures. Parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, they are the simple permanent tissues. Meristematic tissues are changes into permanent tissues like parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. What about complex permanent tissues? Xylem and phloem, they are the complex permanent tissues, right? Xylem is the water conducting tissue, phloem is the food conducting tissue. You know, these are the points we have discussed in the previous classes. Today I am going to explain animal tissues, right? So, animal tissues are classified into four different types based on their functions, based on the location, based on the arrangement, right? Animals have four different types of tissues. Please note down in your classwork, children. What are the different types of animal tissue? First one, epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissues and nervous tissues. How many types of animal tissues are there, children? One is epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, nervous tissue. Let us understand one by one. Okay, so what about that one? What we are going to study now? Epithelial tissues. See that there are certain things we have to keep it in our mind in order to understand the epithelial tissues. Very important point to be noticed. Epithelial tissues, or we can say that epithelium tissue, it consists of single layer of cells. I will show you the different types of simple epithelial tissue, children. On what basis we are classified? Based on the nature of the arrangement of cells. Okay, and it consists of based on what basis, children? Based on the arrangement of layers and functions. Very important point, children. I'll show you here one slide here. 1 minute. See here, types of epithelial tissue. How they are categorized? Based on the layer of cells and based on the shape of cells. What you are going to understand, children? See here, types of epithelial tissue classified in two different variation or parameter. One is number of layers of cells. That means suppose if it is made up of single layer of cells, that is we can call it as a simple epithelial tissue. Very important, children. Observe carefully. Types of epithelial tissue, when we are considering or when we are understanding the types of epithelial tissue, we have to remember two factors. One is number of layers of cells. Okay, and shapes of cells, layers and shapes. Suppose if the cells of the tissues are made up of single layer. Can you observe this slide, children? Observe carefully. See, suppose if the tissues which are arranged in single layer, that is called it as simple epithelial tissue. Understand? What about this? If it is made up of more than one type of cells. Okay, see here, this is single layer, this is multiple layer. Okay, epithelial tissues are classified into Two categories are two factors based on what factor? Based on the layer of cells, that is called it as simple epithelial tissue. Another one is stratified. Stratified means, ma'am, simple opposite complex. No, ma'am, no children, not like that. It is based on the arrangement of layer. They are classified into simple epithelial tissue and stratified epithelial tissue. That means the layers of the cells are arranged in many. Okay, many layers are arranged. Observe carefully. I tell you the uses, children. And what about this, ma'am? Based on the shape. So, squamous epithelial tissue. What is that one? Squamous. Spellings are very, very important. On what basis, ma? Based on the shape. Based on the shape. Another one is cuboidal epithelial tissue. One more, columnar epithelial tissue. Another one is little bit modified in the columnar epithelial tissue, that is called it as ciliated epithelial tissues. I hope understand. Once again, listen, children. See, types of epithelial tissues are classified based on what, ma? Based on the number of layers and based on the shape of cells. Based on number of layers, simple epithelial tissue. Why? Because they are arranged in one type of cells, means single layer. It is arranged in many layers, stratified epithelial tissue. I hope understand. What about the shape? Squamous, cuboidal, columnar and ciliated epithelial tissue. I hope you understand, children. Now let us understand one by one. Animal tissues are classified into four different types. One is squamous epithelial tissue. On what basis we have classified, ma? So based on what? Tell me. Based on the shape. See here, observe carefully the diagram, children. How it looks? It looks like a square. It is arranged in single layer, and very important, blood vessels are not there. Blood vessels are absent in epithelial tissue. Then how the nutrients is transferred to the blood cells, ma'am? To the tissue. Here, observe carefully. This is called as basement membrane. Can you see this one, children? Below the epidermis or below the epithelial tissue. Epidermis we are using in plants, children. Epithelials we are using for animals. Observe carefully. The this is called as basement membrane. Let us understand the more detail about squamous epithelial. Based on what, ma? Based on shape. Cells are arranged end to end, like just like mobile tiles are there on the floor, no? So that is called as mosaic tiles. Have you observed? So now granite tiles are there in at home, right? But it looks like, what are those? This, understand very well. Blood vessels are absent. How do the nutrients are transferred? With the help of the basement membrane. This is called as simple squamous epithelium. Why? Because it is arranged in single layer. I hope understand. What you have to understand, these cells are arranged end to end like tiles on the floor. It forms like where, what is the location, ma'am? Where do we find such a type of tissue? It is present in mouth, esophagus, nose, alveoli. Understand? And also forms the blood vessels covering of the tongue. The epithelial cells are arranged in many layers. That means it helps to prevent wear and tear of the skin. So, what is the main location, ma'am? Means here very important. So, where in our body epithelial tissues are present means skin. Okay, and inside our respiratory and digestive system, and also made up of epithelial tissue. Clear, children? So it is made up of simple epithelial tissue. Next one is cuboidal epithelial tissue. What is the second one, ma? Epithelial tissues are classified into four category. First one is simple. What is that one? Squamous epithelial tissue. Why we can call it as squamous? It is arranged in single layer. It looks like mosaic tiles. It looks like mosaic tiles. Understand? very important. So where do we find, ma'am? Simple, I told you. So simple epithelial tissue or epithelial tissue has two types based on the arrangement of layers. Where do we find simple epithelial tissue? We can find in lungs. So where do we find stratified epithelial tissue? Skin. Why, ma'am? Why the stratified epithelial tissues are present? So skin is made up of many layers, children. So it is for protection. What is that one? Skin is made up of stratified epithelial tissue. What about lungs? Lungs is made up of simple, what is squamous epithelial tissue. I hope understand. Now we can move on to the another one is cuboidal epithelial tissues. Okay, what are those? Why we can call it as a cuboidal epithelial tissue? Because of shape, cube-like structure. Have you seen ice cubes, children? Like that. So the cells are arranged like in ice cubes. Cells of the tissues are cube in shape. Based on the shape, I told you, no. So cells of the tissues are cube in shape. Where do we find, ma'am? What is the location, ma'am? It is found in kidney. Very important. So columnar epithelial tissue which are present in kidney, that also simple squamous epithelial, simple cuboidal epithelial tissues which are present in the kidney. Why? Because, ma'am, because they have to absorb the nutrient, and so they have to filter the nutrient, so that single layer means very easy to absorb the nutrients. And what about salivary gland, sweat glands? So it helps to wear and tear of the what is that one, wear and tear of the epithelial tissue. It also provide mechanical support. What is the main function of the cuboidal epithelial tissue, ma? It helps for or provide mechanical support, and also it helps in test. It is present in testes and ovaries. These are the reproductive organs. I hope understand, children. Next one is we can move on to the columnar epithelial tissue. Just like columns, when they are constructing the house, no, they are pillar like structure, column like structures. So they are pillar like structures, columnar epithelium. It forms the where do we find? What is the location? Location is in the lining of the stomach. It also in the form of small intestine, large intestine. They have a thread like structures which are present on the surface of the cells, and also helps in the absorption. Very important points here. Till now what we have discussed, ma? We have discussed about the types of epithelial tissue. On what basis? Based on the number of layers of cell. One is simple squamous epithelial tissue, another one is stratified epithelial tissue. What about the shape, ma? Squamous epithelial tissue. Why we can call it as squamous? Because the structure is looks like flat square like structures. What about that? Cuboidal epithelial tissue, they are cube like structures. And what about this columnar epithelium? Rectangular and columnar tubular like structures. Where do we find? And all we have discussed, children. So yeah, simple squamous epithelial tissue present in lungs. What type of that one? So simple squamous epithelial tissue present in lungs. Squamous epithelial, this is called it as stratified epithelial tissue present in skin. Why? Because they helps for protection. I hope understand. Why, ma'am, it is like this? If it is simple single layer, so it transport oxygen to the blood very easily. I hope you understand, children. Observe carefully. One more I told you. It is like a columnar cells only, columnar tissues only. But here observe this outward projection, ma. See, they are called it as cilia. Delves for the movement. Delves for movement. They are called it as ciliated. Columnar epithelial tissues, they are made up of or a little bit modified into ciliated epithelial tissue. Delves for, where does it located? It is located in the foot pipe. The foot has to pass through the esophagus now due to the peristaltic movement, contraction and relaxation muscles of the muscles which are present in the esophagus. In this function, ciliated columnar epithelial tissues helps in the digestion process, or they are present in what ma? Esophagus. I hope you understand about the animal tissue. I have covered only one type of tissue. What is that one? Epithelial tissue. Animal tissues are classified into four different types. One is epithelial tissue, only I have discussed. Again, epithelial tissue consists of four different types. Next class I would like to explain connective tissue, muscular tissue, nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue, four different types. Okay, squamous, based on what, children? Based on, tell me, based on shape. Clear? Squamous. Why? Flat-like structure, cube-like structure, cuboidal, columnar, pillar-like structure. What about stratified squamous? Based on the arrangement of layers. Either it may be squamous or it may be stratified because they are layers of the epithelium tissue. Children, my request is copy these figures and notes in your classwork without missing. I hope you understand. Thank you, children.